We got Vic Carucci in the house, which means we're talking Buffalo Bills football. I'm Jonah Vic from Channel 2 Sports, and it's been a rough last 2 weeks for the Bills. The big loss to the Jets on Thursday Night Football, and then following it up with a 47-10 loss to the Saints at home in Orchard Park.
You've seen this consistent thread of a team that, number one, can't stop anybody on the ground. That is something that I never anticipated, probably even from last year's team, and it's gotten worse. We talked a lot about Rex Ryan and this defense that failed over the last 2 years. Well, Jonah, this year it's been abysmal in terms of tackling, in terms of effort or lack thereof. It just shouldn't be that easy for back-to-back opponents to run through and around and over in every possible way against a defense, and one that had started the year playing pretty well, and as this year has gone on, clearly is wearing down, clearly is having problems with assignment issues. And when your defensive coordinator talks about having training camp kind of starting again in season, past midseason, that's a problem. 5-2,
when the Bills were 5-2, the defense was the reason why. We saw turnovers, we saw game-changing plays.
Stopping the run, ranked third in that category.
As well, what's happened the last 2 weeks? I mean, what has gone wrong to lead to the last two losses?
Okay, so I know a lot of people want to point to Marcell Dareus's absence and saying that Marcell not being there is a huge void, and you might lend some credence to that to say he's a big, powerful guy. When he played his best football for the Bills, he was that kind of a run-stopping force. He played his best game of the season, his last game against Tampa Bay, before being shipped off to Jacksonville. But I think that is way too simple an explanation for what's happened. I think beyond Marcell Dareus's absence, others just have not stepped up as they would need to if you had him here. I think these problems would be occurring at a similar rate because the mistakes are kind of happening everywhere. The physical overpowering is taking place in other areas as well. And that's just it. It's not just one thing. You hear the references to people not being in their proper gaps or overcompensating when things go wrong. Usually when things go wrong, the fact that you have overcompensation by players to try to make plays and then giving up spots where they are to open other things, that's a result really of just playing poorly overall. It's a convenient explanation, but it doesn't really talk about solving the problem or addressing that. They have personnel issues, and I think what they're realizing is as they build this program, Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane, looking forward, they've got a lot of new pieces that they do have to get into place. And the thing that I think is primarily missing from this defense is some consistent stoutness, having some big enough people who have that speed or quickness that they value up front, maybe more so than was here before, but they need that, plus the linebackers who do things the way Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis did for Sean McDermott in Carolina. But it's easy to throw those names out. They're outstanding players. You don't just find them and say, oh, yeah, I'll get my version of those guys.
There's been a lot of issues on both sides of the football these past 2 weeks. How do the Bills resolve those problems heading into the last 7 games of the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think to some degree you could say there's introspection, reflection, players talking amongst themselves, maybe without coaches in some of these instances, the proverbial players-only meeting. I mean, I think you've reached that point of desperation where there should be some hard conversations going on, especially with the leaders of the team, the Kyle Williamses, Lorenzo Alexander, Eric Wood, so on and so forth. There needs to be some hard discussions happening within the building about what's gone wrong. And I've heard people like Micah Hyde, a respected, newer voice to the team, but a respected guy for sure, questioning effort or mindset or just kind of going out there and not ready to play their best, being flat. You can't have that when you're still in a playoff hunt and when you're in a conference that makes the ability to get to the playoffs so possible. This is the thing. You really have to screw this up now when you get to 5 wins in a conference where there are so many bad teams, where it's begging for you to take it, and the Bills are still there despite losing back-to-back games. They could suffer another loss and still be in the hunt. That's how ridiculously bad I think the AFC is compared to the NFC at this point. So you shouldn't be squandering that. And again, talking about it is one thing, and then applying it on the practice field, and then maybe some changes, except that I'm not sure how far they can go. Everyone who played, they do this defensive line rotation. I didn't see anyone in there who I thought was so good that that person should be in there versus someone else. You're going to take a hard look at what's going on at quarterback and see where things are with Tyrod Taylor. Right now, I think he's being put in the worst possible position to succeed because he's working primarily from the pocket. Opponents are forcing that, but I also think the coaches want it this way. They want him to succeed from there. That's been the mission since the offseason. And when you saw the change with Nathan Peterman, you saw a quarterback primarily who succeeded from the pocket, which is that type of style of play for him. For Tyrod, he's a much better quarterback when he's on the move.
But that said, this has now become a QB debate because of the 47-10 loss, because people saw Peterman came in and didn't stink it up.
Right.
Even though that was against Saints backup players.
And when the game was way out of hand, yeah.
Right, in garbage time. So what do you make of this QB debate? Should the Bills consider a quarterback change? We know, at least for this week, Tyrod is still the starter. That's what Bills head coach Sean McDermott has said. But if this season really starts to fall down the way maybe it did in 2011, do they consider making a change?
Well, as long as they're in the playoff hunt, you stick with Tyrod Taylor. It would be foolish. It would send, I think, a terrible message to the rest of your team to say that your starting quarterback, who was part of what got you in position to be in the hunt, is now sitting down and someone else is playing. Now, having said that, I want to see this coaching staff do more to help him out with perhaps changing up some blocking schemes to account for the containment that teams are playing. And by that, I mean they're trying to keep him in the pocket, find ways to get him off the snap to the outside, rolling out one way or another and making plays, more of those plays on the move. They give him more options. He's more comfortable in either making reads or throws from that when he's moving, and he can, of course, pull the ball down and just run. And that for him is far better than working from the pocket. But failing that, I mean, if this continues where they're unable to deal with him not being able to move around, or they insist on just keeping him there, then he could very well play himself into a position where they need to make the change. And I can see that, again, if you see a couple of more losses, and this is either the math says they're out or they're teetering on being out, and then you bring in Nathan Peterman and you just trust him to do it the way you want to do it. I don't think there's any question that this coaching staff, Sean McDermott and Rick Dennison, the offensive coordinator, want a pocket passer. That is what they have in Nathan Peterman. That is not what they have in Tyrod Taylor. And trying to make or convert Taylor into that guy, I think ultimately will be a failed experiment.
Taylor, in my mind, is along the lines of a Russell Wilson type because they're mobile, they like to get outside of the pocket, and they tend to make some of their best plays outside of the pocket. But what Russell Wilson has in Seattle is one of the top 3, top 5 defenses in the NFL. When they won the Super Bowl, that was certainly the case. And they had a running game with Marshawn Lynch. These things are all complementary. When the defense gives up 47 points, when LaShawn McCoy gets 8 carries and is unable to run the ball, it puts Tyrod Taylor in a position to fail. And I think the same would go for Nathan Peterman, because if you can't run the ball and the defense can stop, the defense knows you're going to be passing. So from that standpoint, I feel bad for Tyrod in some respects. The offensive system certainly doesn't cater to his talent and his ability, and perhaps maybe we'll see him one day in 2-3 years playing somewhere else in an offense that actually fits what he does best. We're going to discuss some LA Chargers coming up on Sports Talk Sunday on Sunday morning at 10 a.m. I had to remind myself what day. It's only Tuesday. For Vic Carucci, the Buffalo News, I'm Jonah Vic of Channel 2 Sports. Thanks for joining us online.